So welcome to this session of The Agent is In. We have a few people from the CFEngine team. You want to introduce yourselves briefly?
Hey, I'm Nick. I've been doing CFEngine stuff for a while. Probably see me on the mailing list and prior episodes.
Hello, I'm Craig. I've worked on CFEngine for about four or 5 years now, and likewise, previous episodes and future episodes.
My name is Cody. I am Director of Community here on the CFEngine team. So my responsibility is to engage with all of our different customers and just better understand how they're using CFEngine.
Great. And finally, my name is Ole Herman, or just Herman. I'm the product manager for CFEngine, and I'm going to show some features that we're working on today. If you have any questions while I do the demo, feel free to raise your voice or send questions in the chat, and I think Cody will be monitoring that and interrupt me. So I'll just go ahead and start. All right, so you saw the intro slide there. We're going to show something called CFBS today, or the CFEngine Build system. So this is a command line tool for managing your CFEngine policy and different modules and dependency that you may want to bring in to your policy set. One big reason why we're doing this is because we recently introduced custom promise types, which are modules, and they can be written by us or the community, and they're independent of the main CFEngine binary. So you can write them yourself, or you can update them independent of your CFEngine upgrade. So I'm just going to show some terminal demos and show how it works, and hopefully everything will be clear. It's written in Python, so you can install it with pip. Just write pip install cfbs. I have it already. And then it kind of works similar to other programs that you may be familiar with, whether it's npm or Git or cargo. So we'll make a repo. I'll call it my policy, and I'll go into that repo. And from here, we can do cfbs init. So this says initialized. You can edit the name and description in this JSON file, or to add your first module, you can do cfbs add master files. I'll open up an editor here, just so we can see what that file looks like. Okay, let's do this. So this is the project file. It has an example name and example description right now. And the most important part is this build key, which is a array of modules that you want to be included in your policy set. When I say policy set, that's your var CFEngine master files in a normal setup. So I'm going to copy paste this suggested command here, cfbs add master files, and we will see what that did. So here you have the JSON, and the build now has one module. This one is the official CFEngine master files policy framework. So that's the master files policy that we include by default. And this will be our starting point where we can add more modules and more policy to it. Not everything here is kind of self-explanatory. There is a commit SHA, which is the commit that we're working off of. And there are some build steps. That's what's needed to go from the Git checkout to a working policy set. and put it in the right folder. So before we build this, I'm going to add some more modules just to illustrate the idea. So I'm going to add the Git module. Now in the terminal we see it says Git is an alias for promise type Git. It says it's added the module library for promise types in Python, and that's a dependency. And then it added the promise type Git. And this is reflected here in the JSON. First one we saw before. Second one is the library. This is a Python library that enables you to write modules very easily and implement new promise types. And then finally, this is the Git promise type. Okay. So now we can see what that looks like if I want to build this and eventually deploy it to my CFEngine hub. So I'm just going to do build. It says here I have 3 modules at these commit SHAs, and then it goes through these steps for each of the modules. Usually the steps are quite simple, like copy one file to one folder or concatenate, append something to a file. But for master files, there is actually a script that we need to run. Okay, it says the build is complete. There is a directory as well as a tarball ready. So we can take a look at what it outputted. That's here. I have a Git integration here, so you can actually see what is changed compared to the master files checkout. So we can start here. In services init.cf, it has added the promise type definition. And that's this step here, append. So this means that when you start writing policy, you will have the promise type Git available. And it added these 2 files in modules promises. So cfengine.py is the library, git.py is the promise type module. Okay, I'm not going to deploy this yet because we haven't written any policy that does anything. So let's do that first. So as a small example, I'm going to use this this promise type, the Git promise type. So here is a policy file. I will call the bundle as well, just git mirror. And like I said, now that we have the promise type, you can just start using it like any other promise type. So let's specify the version to be master, and the repository is this URL. All right. So with the Git promise type, this is everything you need to write to clone this repo to this folder and check out master and keep that up to date. Additionally, when we have this in master files and we want it to be a part of our normal agent runs, we need to specify that we want this bundle in the bundle sequence. There's multiple ways to do this, so I'll show one way here, and that's using the Autorun functionality. So for Autorun to work, you need to add a tag, and this is similar to just a variable, but it's a list of tags where one of them is Autorun.
Hey Herman, now that you're using this Autorun tag, how are you gonna turn Autorun on? It's not on by default.
Yeah, this you will see in a second. There's a module that turns that on. So I'm going to go ahead now in the terminal and I'll type cfbs add, and then instead of the name of a module, I'll just type the policy file name. And here it says it added a module called Autorun, and it's claimed that this is a dependency, and then it added the module gitmirror.cf. So we're going to expand this to support more ways than just using Autorun here, and you can actually do that just by editing the JSON, basically. But if we take a look at this JSON now, it's added 2 new modules, and the first one is neither CFEngine policy nor is it a Python script. It's just a JSON step. So it just does something with your augments.json file to enable Autorun. It also says here that this was added by this other module, so that signifies that it's a dependency. It's not something we explicitly wanted to add. And then finally, gitmirror.cf. This one is very simple. It's just about copying this policy file into this location.
So it just parsed the policy file to determine that it needed to add the Autorun module?
No, it's just that the Autorun is the only way that it's automatically supported now by CFBS add.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'll show later a place where we don't use the Autorun, but in this case, I'm just using Autorun. So let's now go ahead and build again so we can see what that did. Okay, the folder should be in the same place. We see that the augments file now has the services Autorun class set. So that's everything you need to do for Autorun to be enabled. And then in here, in master files, services, Autorun, it's added our policy. So now this policy is ready to be deployed. And I already have a hub set up with CFEngine 3.18, and it has the name hub in my CF remote tool. So I can just copy this command and run it. And this will copy over the tarball that you saw here to that hub and run the necessary steps to replace the policy that's already there with our new policy. File transfer over the network is always a good opportunity to ask questions.
Yeah, so I've played with this tool a couple of times.
Yeah.
And so here you're like deploying directly to var CFEngine master files, like using an SSH key that's authorizing you to do so.
Yes.
Do you expect this to be like the typical deployment method, or do you have, or like, is there going to be some other methodology like that is typically used to deploy from this thing that gets built?
Right. So this for an enterprise installation, this will be a part of what we've called previously the master file staging script, which is our Git integration in Mission Portal. So in Mission Portal, you can set up a Git repo and connect that so that Mission Portal automatically pulls down your policy, prepares it, and puts that into the correct folder. And this would be the same. It would just pull down a Git repo, run this cfbs build command, and then deploy that policy in the same way. And for a community installation, it's pretty much the same thing. You just don't have our UI, so you can just set up this script to do that yourself. Pull from Git, run build, and put it in the right folder. Okay, good question. This is copied over and installed now, so I'll just to show that it's working, I'll SSH into this machine. Okay, so we said we were going to clone something into temp cf remote. That's already happened because the policy has already run. We can remove that folder and run the policy again. So note that I'm now running the policy without, or I'm now running the agent without any arguments, and it's finding and running this this bundle that we wrote. So it's saying cloning this repo into this folder, and it's there again. If we run the agent one more time, it's not going to give an info message because it's already cloned. There's nothing more to do. So the only thing this is doing is just some enterprise hub maintenance in the background.
So how smart is that Git promise type? What if you go in there and check out a previous revision?
Good question. I didn't write it, so I don't know, but let's see. So do we have Git here? Yeah. So if we do checkout head -1, so now we're in the touch state, that's fine. And then run agent. Yeah. It says it checked it out. It seems like it's a little bit slow, so it's probably doing something over the network. But if we went back to here and do status, it's now on master. So I haven't looked at exactly what this is doing. It might be just that since we're specifying master, it is actually going ahead and fetching from this remote to see if there is something new on master, and that's why it's hitting the network.
So when you ran Git, or sorry, CV, what's your tool name again?
CFBS.
Yes. Add Git mirror. It installed it into services Autorun. How did it know to put it into services Autorun? Can you tell it to install it elsewhere?
Yes. So when you run cfbs add, it adds a step, a module and some steps to this JSON file. And then when you run build, it performs those steps. And the steps that were added here was to modify this JSON using this Autorun bundle, and to copy the gitmirror.cf policy file into this directory. And currently, that's the thing that cfbs add will always do if you specify a .cf file name. But we do want to support different ways of adding policy here. So one way would be to add a directory and say that you want all of the policy files in that directory to be included. Of course, being able to specify somewhere else than Autorun makes sense as well. And also not using Autorun at all should be an option. It's not something that the tool does currently.
Right.
Yeah. So if you're not using Autorun, then you need to do two things. You need to add each policy file to inputs, and you need to add each bundle that you want to be run to the bundle sequence. Okay. And we are actually towards the end of the demo. I can show some more examples. Oh, we don't have it on that machine. So there is a search command that shows some of the modules that are available right now. Not all of these are final or ready, but the Git and the systemd promise types are quite feature rich and announced already. So those you can definitely try today. If I go ahead and look at one of the others, like Python 3.8. Yeah, there's no autocomplete here. So this one is maybe a little bit more interesting because this one does not use Autorun. So this is just an example that I added for installing Python 3.8. And you see here that the steps are copy this Python 3.8.cf file into a different folder that's not Autorun. And then still we're using augments to do something. So I'll just build this and you can see what the augment step does. Okay, so we've built that now, and we can go to def.json, the augments file. And here you see that the Python 3.8 module is adding that policy file to inputs, and it's adding the bundle to the bundle sequence end. So that works. That's a way to use it if you don't want to use Autorun. It's just not something you can choose to do with the add command yet.
So why did, I'm just curious if there was any reasoning behind choosing vars augments inputs here versus the top level inputs key?
Not really. Not really, no. The vars augments inputs is supported in the host specific data as well. So I guess I'm just more inclined to think about the things that are supported in both places. But here you can also use the top level augments key. Cool. All right. Any questions or any feature requests or things you'd like to see from this this tooling? I guess from the audience. Okay.
I'm a little bit curious how to combine this with like canaries. So if I've got this new policy set built by CFBS, and then I want to have a subset of my infrastructure using this separate policy, what's the process involved there?
So you mean in the scenario where you have one hub and you want to deploy the different policy to different of your clients? Yeah, that's definitely a cool feature that we've looked at, but that's not something that this tool does anything with.
Okay.
This
maybe we use host specific data to identify the policy build, whatever version of the build.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could have like maybe class-based augments that might add inputs and bundle sequence items, maybe.
All right, Craig, I'm curious what your favorite feature here is so far.
I like the fact that there's a cfbs.json file that I can hack. I like that. So like my first thought when I started working with this was I want to dog food master files every day and get the latest from master. So then I think eventually I might, if I get around to it or somebody else does, we'll have like a CFS upgrade, CFBS upgrade that would maybe take like the latest master files from master and update the commit SHA for that, but I can just do it myself when I want to right now. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm looking forward to, is like getting to the point where I can start with the generic master files and then gradually add back in like things that I have in a way that I'm not clobbering master files, which is, I think, is really cool, because I've done a few big upgrades of policy and it's not pleasant really. So having a way to have the master files and then overlay things in a kind of repeatable, reproducible way is great.
Yeah, so I guess that's something we didn't touch on today, but we talked about yesterday, Nick, is this is obviously our master files, but it could also be your master files repo. So if you already have a master files repo, you could put that here and then build on top of that without actually making any changes to your repo. And the even more kind of advanced and future thinking approach would then be to have our master files here and then your master files overlaid and then all of the new modules. And what you can then work towards is a situation where you start taking things out of your master files repo, and your master files repo, or what used to be your repo, is just customizations that you've made. So you bring in our default policy and then your customizations and then any modules that you want to use. And that means that for the next upgrade, the only thing you have to do is to change the version of this dependency. And that changes your master files. And then as long as your customizations are still valid, or if you have them in patches or however you want to do that, that's the only thing you need to do in an upgrade scenario.
So I'm really interested in this, like the features around being able to kind of show spots where like my custom policy has maybe diverged from upstream because I've either put in custom patches or along the way somewhere maybe I didn't complete a framework upgrade all the way. So I'm really looking forward to surfacing that type of information and making the cases where I do have to make modifications to the base framework, tracking those modifications a bit easier. But I got to say, I got a whole bunch of anxiety about letting go of my whole policy set. Like I'm very accustomed to having that whole policy set right there, and I can sift through it, and this is very different for me.
Yeah, that's true, but that's what you are describing is a lot of stuff to manage, like managing that whole repo. And if you want to bring in promise type modules as well, I think you would prefer some system where it's easier to upgrade those dependencies, even though they're no longer all in one folder on your computer.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, I guess maybe my favorite thing is an easier way to find and share, I guess, reuse some of these things.
Yeah,
I've written a lot of policy over the years. It's copious amounts of it are available in various places, but like being able to search for it, I think is going to be a big win. And then obviously, pulling down stuff like these custom promise types, where like I close my eyes, somebody else writes something, and then I can just consume it. I'm kind of excited about that, but I'm also very interested to see, what things you're going to do to help minimize my anxiety about trusting that this thing is going to stitch these things together in an acceptable way.
Yeah. So I can touch on that briefly. So All of this is you can't have your repo anymore with just all of your things in it, but you do have a reproducible build system. So what you build on your machine, and then when you send that Git repo to another machine and you build it there, will be the same. And it's always based on these SHAs. So it's not like if somebody updates master branch one place and then suddenly you get a different build on your hub. That's not what it does. So the commands that you kind of run manually, like cfbs add or in the future cfbs update, those change the JSON definition. Those can add things here, make the build different, update the versions. But when you transfer this definition to another machine and run cfbs build there, it will always be the same output as on your machine.
So like today I use the CF policy release ID to kind of track a policy distribution kind of, across the infrastructure. It doesn't take very long using the default schedule for like everybody to be running the same version. But if there's some host that's lagging behind either because it's got some reporting problem or connectivity issue, I'll use that release ID because the master file stage tooling, when it runs, it'll tag the thing for release, which if you're using a Git backend, then it puts that commit SHA of the repo at that point in time into that information, so I can match up that Git SHA. So then I guess that similarly using this methodology, then I would have the commit SHA of this pretty bare thing that at least has the cfbs.json in it, and I would just have the commit SHA of that I track as far as like what's rolled out across the infrastructure.
Yeah, that's what I would do. So I would make this Git repo now, Git Init, and add the out folder to Git ignore, and then start making commits, and then your commit SHA represents all of the content you have in here, which the main thing is the JSON, but if you are doing things like this and you are writing policy in here as well, then that should also contribute to that one version SHA that determines what's your policy release ID. Because obviously if I don't include this one, then that means that something can change this file and it doesn't affect the version SHA, which would kind of defeat the purpose.
So then my last question is, if I don't have CFBS installed locally, how would I peruse the things that are available?
The things that are available in CFBS? Yeah.
Yeah, modules or like things that I could install, etc.
Yeah, so we are working on a website for that. That's launching by the end of the year, but in the meantime you can find the list on GitHub as well. So here is the list of things.
Cool.
Awesome.
Okay.
Interesting. So I'm just noticing here that the build steps are here in the index, as opposed to in the like place wherever the stuff is expected to remain that way.
Yes. So there are some layers of duplication here for that are intentional. So the way that it should work is that when you make a new repo, you will make, if you're making a module, you should make a JSON file that looks something like this in your repo. And then you can like test that, and you can add that as a dependency in CFBS using the full URL to your repo before you've even added it to the index. And then you submit it here as a pull request to us, and we copy the steps and everything that you have defined, and we test it before we merge it. And then finally, when a user adds a module from the index, the steps are copied again to their cfbs.json. And so even though, like in most cases, all those three will be the same, but it means that there is some room for customization there. Like if you want users that clone your module directly from the URL that don't use the index, you can specify some different steps for them. But the steps that are here in the index, those are the ones that are approved by us. And then in the end, you also allow the user to customize if they want to build it differently somehow in their cfbs.json, like we looked at here.
So I know I said that my last question was about something else, but I'm going to break that promise. So you mentioned testing. Is there going to be some support in here for testing, like, you know, wiring it in with any or all of the various things, you know, Jenkins, Travis, Circle CI?
Yeah, so
your mom's build system.
So there will be some automated tests. We don't have a complete outline of all that will be, but at the very least, it will probably be some syntax checking if you're submitting policy, or similar for Python code, or similar for the JSON code. So definitely things that are easy to add. When it comes to more comprehensive acceptance tests, deployment tests, then we have to spend some time and thought power on how to do that.
Awesome, exciting.
So we're a few minutes over here already. So any final thoughts, feedback, or questions from the audience? All been pretty interesting. So maybe at some point we do a part 2 session of this.
Yeah, we can show more in a little while when more functionality is implemented.
Cool. Well, thank you, Herman, for giving us a sneak peek at that. I guess just wrapping up here, as always, we'll publish this video to our YouTube. So if anybody wants to rewatch it, they certainly can do that. But if not, I hope everybody has a great rest of your day. Thanks for joining us.